Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. Have you ever read a headline that just screams senseless, only to be left wondering if there's truly more to the story beneath the surface? Today, we're digging into a recent, intense conflict between Thailand and Cambodia. The Economist famously labeled it a senseless border war. But what if that senseless label, while maybe capturing the immediate shock, actually obscures a much more complex and, in some ways, surprisingly rational set of underlying motivations? We're going to explore this for you, try to give you a clearer picture of what really happened.
It's a truly fascinating question because, on the surface, the rapid escalation we saw with over 40 people dead in just 5 days and a staggering 300,000 civilians forced from their homes, it certainly felt inexplicable. Just chaos, right? Seemingly without clear logic. But as we start to unpack the events of late July, digging into the history and maybe the lesser-known economic drivers, we start to see how these century-old grievances, modern gray economy tensions, and frankly shrewd domestic political gambits all kind of intertwine. We'll look at where the Economist article provided some crucial insights, definitely, and also where its framing might have, maybe unintentionally, missed some critical pieces of the puzzle, pieces that really tie the whole story together, you know?
Okay, let's start where The Economist did with that initial picture. Intense, sudden violence. The article sketches this scene of rockets flying, F-16s dropping bombs, a heavy death toll along that 200-kilometer frontier, kicking off dramatically around July 24th. It rightly notes the immediate cause wasn't clear, suggesting it was just a senseless spillover, old grievances boiling over. What parts of that initial assessment really hold up when you look closer?
Well, what stands out immediately from the article is how accurately it captures the raw historical tension. That part's undeniable. It highlights the deeply ingrained nature of this border dispute, tracing it all the way back to a 1904 treaty between Siam, Thailand, and colonial France. Then, crucially, there's a 1908 French map. It drew a line that controversially placed these historically and culturally vital temples like Pria Viher.
Ah, yes, Priya-Ver, that rings a bell.
Exactly. It placed them on the French colonial side, and this decision was later solidified when the International Court of Justice awarded those temples to Cambodia in 1962. Now, this isn't just ancient history, right? This historical context, steeped in national pride, temple heritage, it's been a recurring flashpoint. We saw it in earlier skirmishes between, 2008 and 2011, sadly left 34 people dead then, too. So the idea of historical grievances igniting conflict, absolutely. That's a very real element.
And The Economist also brings in the domestic politics angle, suggesting internal power plays in both countries significantly fueled the conflict. Is that right? They mention things like Thailand's crackdown on the scam industry, Cambodian oil talks, even whispers of a military coup in Thailand. And it specifically detailed that leaked conversation between the Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra and former Cambodian leader Hun Sen. That led to her suspension, didn't it? How much weight should we give these internal political motivations?
That's a powerful point, and yeah, The Economist was spot on in recognizing that elite incentives matter immensely. Paetongtarn's political vulnerability in Thailand, definitely. And then you have Hun Sen's enduring, almost shadow-like influence in Cambodia, even after stepping down as PM. It certainly provided fertile ground, for hardliners in both nations to posture aggressively, maybe escalate tensions. Political actors often use external conflicts to consolidate power, distract from problems at home, and we saw elements of that here for sure. The article also persuasively highlighted America's role, a key peace broker.
The U.S. intervention.
Yes. President Trump's sudden threat of that steep 36% tariff on both countries, combined with already wobbling Thai export orders and Cambodia actively trying to court U.S. shoe brands, that did seem to be a decisive factor. It forced a remarkably quick truce. The potential economic pain, a tariff freeze on trade talks, it landed at a crucial moment, no doubt about it.
So on the surface, the article from The Economist really does paint a coherent, if tragic, story. It connects history, domestic politics, external pressure. But here's where the narrative truly twists, you could say, when you begin to dig deeper into the broader context. That initial idea of a senseless war starts to feel like, an oversimplification. You're suggesting there was this whole other layer here, something that perhaps makes this senseless conflict surprisingly rational, at least from certain perspectives. Where do we start peeling back that simplification?
Precisely. And it begs the crucial question, was it genuinely senseless? Or was there a more direct, albeit less obvious, strategic logic? What The Economist's framing perhaps overlooked, or maybe just glossed over, was the immense and growing problem of these illegal casino and cyber scam enclaves, operating with alarming impunity on the Cambodian side of the border. These aren't small-time operations. I mean, we're talking vast, sophisticated criminal enterprises. Bangkok alone estimated it lost, an astonishing $1 billion to fishing rings in 2024, directly hitting Thai citizens, their economy. So from Thailand's perspective, military pressure wasn't necessarily just irrational overreaction. It might have been a coercive policing tactic. A drastic, maybe, but calculated move to dismantle these criminal operations that were bleeding their economy and causing real social harm.
Wow. So, okay, what we thought was primarily about historical temples might actually have been a proxy for something far more modern and, frankly, much dirtier. It sounds like the article's heavy focus on heritage might have obscured the real action on the ground.
That's the critical insight, I think. While temple symbolism is undeniably real, absolutely, it can animate nationalist feelings. But it's telling that the July firefights happened at only 2 temple sites, and even there, they weren't the most intense clashes. Crucially, the fiercest, most sustained barrages, they were happening 40 kilometers west of those temples, right near known scam compounds and notorious timber smuggling routes. This geographical difference strongly suggests that material criminal economies, the huge profits from scams, illicit gambling, illegal logging, these were the primary drivers of troop deployments and the sheer intensity of the fighting, not solely the cultural heritage sites.
That really shifts our understanding of the ground conflict entirely. But let's pivot to the diplomatic side for a second. The economists highlighted America's mediation as key, almost like they singularly forced a ceasefire. Was their role truly that dominant, or was there more at play behind the scenes?
Well, the U.S. tariff threat was certainly an amplifier, no question. Significant leverage, a powerful reason to de-escalate. But it wasn't the sole orchestrator of peace. That's maybe where the picture is a bit simplified. What's often overlooked is that ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, actually provided the formal ceasefire framework. Malaysia, as the chair at the time, convened an emergency summit. Washington's pressure definitely amplified the urgency, helped push the parties to the table, yes. But it didn't originate the diplomatic solution itself. ASEAN's role was, arguably, far more central to crafting the actual agreement than the narrative might suggest. It showcased the region's own capacity, however fragile sometimes, for self-governance in a crisis.
And finally, on the causality. The article implies that Thailand's internal political turmoil essentially caused the clash. But the timeline you mentioned earlier hints at something different, almost a reverse causality.
It raises that important question of cause and effect, doesn't it? The sequencing of events, when you look really closely, it suggests the opposite of what was implied. Artillery exchanges started first. Then the leaked Pitomtarn Hun Sen conversation surfaced, and only then did her suspension follow. So the fighting didn't seem to spring directly from Thailand's political instability. Rather, it appears the conflict itself significantly worsened Thailand's internal political stability. It seems the border clash wasn't just a symptom of existing political games, but perhaps an exacerbating factor, throwing more fuel on an already simmering domestic fire.
So, okay, going beyond just challenging the economist's core arguments, what bigger, maybe unseen currents did this conflict illuminate that weren't fully explored in that initial reporting? What are the broader implications, the so what moments for us, for the listeners, and the entire Southeast Asian region?
A really crucial insight here, which was largely glossed over, concerns the immense humanitarian and legal stakes involved. We're talking of very serious allegations of cluster munitions use. Now, that's the use of weapons designed to scatter smaller bomblets over a wide area, causing indiscriminate harm. That potentially invites international criminal court scrutiny. Serious stuff. Combine that with the staggering figure of 300,000 displaced people, it fundamentally changes the calculus for leaders who might be tempted to bank on short, contained wars. You know, the human toll is undeniable, and the potential legal fallout for commanders, for political figures, it's immense. It significantly raises the cost of conflict.
And ASEAN, the regional bloc, this must have been a huge test for them, for their ability to manage crises among their own members.
Absolutely. A severe and very public test for ASEAN's crisis management capabilities. Look, if the ceasefire monitoring mechanisms fail, the bloc's long-standing non-interference norm, their basic principle of not meddling in member states' internal affairs, well, it will again appear toothless. And that could potentially create a vacuum, right? Inviting outside security guarantees from major powers like China or the U.S., which would then significantly complicate the already intricate regional dynamics. It truly highlights the fragility of these regional stability mechanisms and the desperate need for them to be robust, to be effective.
It sounds like there's also this persistent underlying economic driver here, something beyond just the scams and illicit stuff. More formal, but still unresolved.
Yes, there's a significant resource undercurrent, often gets overlooked in the heat of the moment. There's an ill-defined joint development area, the JDA, in the Gulf of Thailand, guesstimated to hold an astonishing 500 million barrels of oil equivalent. That's massive potential wealth. However, it still completely lacks a formal revenue-sharing pact between Thailand and Cambodia. Without tangible progress on how to divide up and profit from this energy wealth, any border calm is unlikely to stick in the long run. It's a huge economic incentive just sitting there, unresolved, simmering beneath the surface, and it could easily spark future tensions.
And finally, you mentioned the weaponry. The conflict showed signs of more advanced weapons being used. What does that tell us about broader trends, military tech in the region?
Yeah, that brings up a critical point about military technology diffusion in Southeast Asia. Reports emerged of sophisticated Swedish-supplied RBS-70 missile systems. Israeli-made Lynx rockets being used. These aren't old Cold War relics. They underscore accelerating arms upgrades across the entire region. And this trend dramatically heightens the risk that the next flare-up, should it happen, could turn deadlier, faster, and become far more difficult to contain. It impacts regional stability directly, really raises the stakes for every future dispute.
So, given all these layers,
Yeah.
this complex situation, what does it all mean for the various actors involved? What should we, the listeners, be watching for? Or maybe what actions could lead to more stable outcomes in this volatile region?
Well, for ASEAN, the immediate next step is absolutely crucial. They need to dispatch a neutral monitoring mission fast. Indonesia has already proactively offered battalion-level observers, which is positive, but getting them on the ground before the rainy season hits and impedes access roads, that's vital for effective monitoring, for preventing more violations. This really can't wait.
And for Bangkok and Phnom Penh themselves, how can they move forward in a way that tackles the root causes, not just the symptoms?
Fundamentally, they need to de-link the symbolic temple demarcation issue from the pragmatic necessity of cracking down on organized crime. There's separate problems needing separate tracks. It's vital to establish maybe a bilateral joint security zone, one that allows Thai police forces operating under Cambodian command with respect for sovereignty to directly access and address those criminal elements. It would be a more targeted, effective approach to the scam issue without escalating into a full-blown border war over cultural sites every time.
And for international players like the U.S., the EU, they use tariffs to pressure a truce. What's their continued leverage, their responsibility now?
Their leverage should definitely be applied more broadly, more strategically. They should condition future tariff relief or other economic incentives, not just on the ceasefire holding, but specifically on the prosecution of the trafficking gangs, the scam kingpins, because their vast revenues are effectively financing local commanders, perpetuating these gray economies. That would tackle a root cause much more effectively than just demanding a ceasefire.
Right. And finally, for investors, humanitarian aid agencies looking at this region, what should be their immediate and long-term focus?
They absolutely need to prepare for prolonged displacement with significant foresight. Consider this. 40% of those uprooted are subsistence farmers. They risk missing an entire planting season if the heavy rains arrive before they can safely return home. This is a critical humanitarian concern. It requires immediate attention, robust planning, sustained support to prevent a secondary crisis, food insecurity, long-term poverty.
So, what began as a story of a senseless conflict between Thailand and Cambodia, as presented by The Economist, truly reveals itself to be, well, a deeply layered and in some ways surprisingly rational situation. It's not just about old maps and ancient temples, is it? It's a complex, modern blend of 21st century gray economy tensions, sophisticated domestic political maneuvering, and the constant pressure of unresolved resource disputes.
Yeah, The Economist was right that nationalist symbols can ignite passions. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that elite political incentives matter. Definitely. But it perhaps underestimated the immense gravitational pull of those organized crime revenues, and maybe overplayed America's unilateral role in the peacemaking a bit. At the end of the day, unless ASEAN can effectively police both these contested borders and the black markets operating within them, the ceasefire will likely remain as fragile as those ancient temples precariously overlooking the Dangrik cliffs.
And perhaps the biggest question for you, the listener, to consider is this. How often do headlines truly simplify these complex geopolitical conflicts? And what other senseless stories out there might have similar hidden rationales underneath the surface, just waiting to be unpacked?